Hey YouTube, welcome to Rampage Reviews. I'm Rampage, and today we're digging into one of the High Republic books. It was just written last year, and I have some opinions about this book. Let's dive in. So the book we're reviewing today is The High Republic Convergence, and it takes place 382 years BBY. It's a story about two worlds that have been conflicting for some time, several years in fact, and they're actually entering a 3-day ceasefire. The story itself doesn't seem to be a story that has any major impact on the history of Star Wars. There's nothing in the book that defines how the story of Star Wars moves forward with any particular group, such as any of the politics, the Jedi, the Sith, anything like that. The one thing that does stay consistent though with the storyline, and since it is part of the canon storyline, is that there are no Sith mentioned in this book. So the Sith are believed to be extinct. We at least don't know about any that exist at this point, or who might exist at this point. The two worlds that are fighting are Irano and Iram. Can't remember if they're in the Outer Rim, but I believe they do exist in the Outer Rim from what I remember in the book. There's going to be a lot of things that were hard for me to remember about the book because, to be honest with you, the book, there was nothing striking that made me recall like any major events that where I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like crazy that that happened because then this might happen in the future. Like nothing like that struck to me. Like even with like Knight Errant, when I reviewed that, some of the powers that the Sith Lords had, like the Diarchy, like had some crazy interesting powers, and I'm like, whoa, what if we see that again in the future? I didn't see anything in this book that really made me believe that. Moving on, Irano was attempting to escort an ice hauler to their planet that was brought from afar, and it contained ice and also other supplies. Irano is a very hot, like deserty planet, very little water, so they wanted to bring ice onto the planet and other supplies to help the people on the ground. But they needed to make sure they stayed out of Irami space in order to do this because they are in a ceasefire, but if they cross over into Irami territory, the Iram forces will view that as a hostile action and they might take fire onto Irano. While they're escorting this ship, the Chancellor's ship, the Paxian, actually comes out of hyperspace and kind of disrupts the whole proceeding. You find out later that he came on the request of Queen Adriala of Iram. He was aware of the conflicts of the two planets, and he had some sort of urge to be there to help reach a peaceful resolution between the two planets. After the Paxian dropped out of hyperspace, the Irani forces were then attempting to stay out of Irami space. There were forces on the other side of that border, if you want to call it that belonged to Iram, and they were making sure that the Irani forces didn't cross over. But then one of the Irani ships actually started to malfunction, and he was kind of out of control. While he's exhibiting this, he actually fires a few shots on accident into space. Then Iram sees that, and they believe that to be hostile, so they start taking fire. So then there's a dogfight that kind of happens. However, Ziri Albaran, who is the captain of the Irani forces, she's also the daughter of the monarch of Irano. She attempts to negotiate with General Lao, who's one of the generals of Iram. He doesn't really appear in any other part of the book, so this is the only time you're going to hear of him. He's not significant. But she attempts to negotiate with him to let him know, hey, this was not on purpose. This was an accidental fire. Please, like ceasefire. Let's make sure we're not fighting. And then she's able to convince him that, okay, they're not really trying to fire on us. And she actually tries to go after this renegade ship because it's still flying out of control. He can't control it, and it's going towards Iram, and it's about to fly into Iram's atmosphere and then onto Iram's surface. Another Jedi, Gela Natai, who was actually aboard the Paxian with the Chancellor. There's actually 5 people altogether that were on that ship. Chancellor Malo, Master Char-Ryl-Roy, Master Creighton's son, and a Jedi Knight named Gela Natai, who I just mentioned, and a Jedi Padawan named Enya Keen. Gela realizes that she's needed. She wants to get out there and help this out-of-control ship. So she leaves with Ziri, and also General Lao joins to try to help control this ship. They're all flying towards Iram's surface. Eventually, the out-of-control ship explodes in the sky. I believe it hits there's like a force field above Iram that it hits, and I think it explodes from impacting that. Ziri and General Lao were able to get through that force field, and then they crash landed onto Iram. Gela did not go that far. I don't believe she flew all the way into the atmosphere. She stopped short and she went back to the Paxian. Ziri lands, she lands in water actually, because Iram is actually covered in water. There's a lot of water in Iram, mostly salt water, so it's like kind of the opposite of Irano in that sense. There's someone who finds her. His name is Fantu Zen, who is the son of Queen Adriella, who I mentioned earlier, and heir to that throne. He finds her in the water, saves her, pulls her out. She's really skeptical. You know, Irano and Iram, they're a lot of conflict right now. They don't trust each other. So she's skeptical of anything that's happening. She believes that maybe he might try to swindle her in some way. He's very genuinely trying to be helpful and hospitable. So he takes her to the queen. They try to give her water, give her food, make sure she's comfortable. And all the while she's refusing anything from them because she just wants to get out of there, basically. The chancellor sends a message to the queen and says, hey, all of the parties involved, Irano and Iram, need to meet on the moon. There's a shared moon between these planets. If I can do a little side explanation without rambling too much, this moon it's a shared moon, so these two planets are like a gravitational anomaly. They share a moon, and they're close enough. You don't have to use your hyperdrive to visit each planet. You can basically fly to the other planet, almost like you're flying from one continent to another, something like that. The chancellor says that all parties involved have to meet on this moon, on the Paxian, he's docked there, to discuss peace negotiations. And he says if anyone is absent from this peace summit, he will impose sanctions on those planets that don't attempt to discuss any negotiations for peace. On top of that, Irano's monarch Alberan, who's the father to Ziri, sends a message to the queen and says, if you don't return my daughter by morning, then I'm going to fire upon your planet. You got a couple of people here that are forcing everybody's hands. They eventually all agree to meet on the moon. So at this point, the leaders of these planets are just trying to see what they can do to create peace between the two planets. Actually, the queen is she's more in pursuit of that. The monarch of Irano is a little more skeptical. He's a little bit more of a warlord. He just wants to fight them out of existence to where they are just like so crippled that they can't bother Irano. That's kind of the way he's operating. But he's also hearing these kinds of things in his ear from his right-hand man, Viceroy Farrell, who's like his military right-hand man, is always in his ear trying to let him know how he can dispose of the Iram forces. That's all he's trying to do basically throughout the whole book. You later find out that he's part of this like terrorist group called the Children of Irano. They have no desire to reach any kind of peace between the two planets, basically. You see different proceedings in the book, different actions taken between Ziri and Fantu to try to help spur this peace along. And that's after their meeting on the moon that these kinds of things happen. But on the moon, when they have their peace summit, eventually they reach an agreement, and it's Ziri and Fantu that lead that initiative, and they decide that it's best if they both get married. I think Ziri brought that about. She thinks that they should her and Fantu should get married to join these worlds together and create everlasting peace. Fantu also agrees that that's a good resolution and decides that they should announce a marriage between the two. Immediately following them announcing that they want to partake in this marriage, one of the lieutenants of Irano, Lieutenant Sagaru, is killed in a bedroom. Both parties were able to try to argue their way out of being at fault or being guilty. They all had alibis. So nobody was able to be pinpointed on who the guilty party was. And so now they have a couple of things they have to accomplish. They have to hold a respectful funeral for Lieutenant Sagaru, and they have to then announce their intent to marry to join the two worlds together. So it's kind of some contentious things going on here at this point. Obviously the monarch is skeptical of Iram. He believes that somebody might have worked to kill Captain Sagaru or Lieutenant Sagaru. It's just a very weird series of events that creates some more distrust between the two parties. After they announce their marriage, obviously there's people on Irano that are against it. It seems like the people of Iram really want this peace, like most of the people. I didn't really hear any people on the ground that were just outspoken about neither planet being at peace with each other. It was mostly Irano doing that. And then you got the Children of Irano, who's this terrorist group that wants no part in peace at all. But they do different things, like they travel around and try to distribute supplies to different people to give them food and water to help them out, and also just to kind of create this like symbol of, look, we're working together, we can create peace together, blah blah, you know. Now there's another player in this book. His name is Axel Greylark. He is son to another chancellor. There are two chancellors in this book. Two chancellors of the Republic. I don't know if you're a fan of The Office, but one of the chancellors takes care of day-to-day stuff, and then the other chancellor takes care of big picture stuff. Only two managers. I don't know when that practice dissolved and when they decided to go with one, but right now there's two. So Chancellor Greylark is the mother to Axel Greylark. And Axel's kind of like the sarcastic scoundrel. He gambles. He smuggles things at times. Like does a lot of shady things. But he's also the son to political leadership, so Chancellor Greylark is constantly having to put out fires and maintain her image in the political space. Axel is actually sent to oversee the peace negotiations between Irino and Irem by Chancellor Greylark. So he gets there, and he kind of acts as just like a background sarcastic presence in the book for the most part. There wasn't a lot of things that seemed significant that he did. You find out later there are some things he did that were of significance, but throughout the book, he kind of lays low for the most part. Later, Ziri and Fantu are trying to work towards this marriage, and they eventually have the marriage on Irem. But before that happens, Viceroy Farrell is also killed. There's kind of an investigation into that, because now Irino thinks that Irem is just really trying to screw with him, and they have no idea what's going on. There's just different there's skepticism all around, and Ziri and Fantu, these things are happening, and they're literally trying to put out these fires to just assure people we're just after peace. We have no idea why these things are happening, and so on and so forth. We talked about the Children of Irino, but there's another, I guess you'd call them a terrorist group. They're kind of more secretive though. They're called the Path of the Open Hand, and I guess they're kind of like the mafia. You go to them if you need to like take out somebody of significance so you can move forward with your agenda. You find out that Queen Adriella actually enlisted them to sabotage Irino's ship during that escort mission they had at the beginning of the book. But then the Path of the Open Hand, I guess they keep asking for more things in return. I think they have their own agenda at place. It's kind of hard to place what that agenda is. Axel is actually revealed to be part of the Path of the Open Hand. He works with them on occasion and reports to the Mother, which is the leader of this group. Axel was tasked with killing Viceroy Farrell, which he did. So he was the kind of the chaotic spark catalyst, if you will, to all of this distrust and chaos going on. He reveals that to Gilla later, Gilla Nadai, one of the Jedi Knights. This is immediately before he reveals that he has bombs placed on some of the towers that he sets off and explodes, these towers that provide the force fields that are above Irem. So literally just to create chaos. That's what he's there for. And this is during the marriage between Ziri and Fantu. So then that happens. It doesn't spark any kind of like following scene. It just kind of happens, and it's kind of like an ultimate FU from Axel to everybody else, because he's just dealing with all of these demons in his head basically. Well, and then they mention that Axel gets arrested by Irem forces. Ziri and Fantu move forward with their marriage, and now it's up to them to find out how they can prolong everlasting peace between the planets. Awesome. What did I think about the book? Earlier I said it was hard to like recall specific events in the book because there was nothing in the book, not very many things in the book that were striking to me where I was like, oh man, this happened. It was, for me, it wasn't a big page turner. It wasn't something that I just could not put down. I could get through 20 or 30 pages at a time, and then I'd have to put it down to go through later. I want to read all these books. I'm not like gonna get through a book and stop and then do a video. I am committed to getting all the way through the book, even if I hate the book, which, you know, like I said before, I don't hate any of them because it's all Star Wars. That's great. But yeah, some of them are going to be a lot better than others. And this one, it wasn't there for me. And the biggest reason is because a lot of the players in the book were kind of boring. I shouldn't say that with a blanket though. So Axel Greylark was actually a pretty cool character. I liked him a lot. Just because he was unpredictable. You didn't know what he was going to do. He was sarcastic. He was funny. I like that character. I kind of like Ziri's character because she was just a strong presence, and then like just didn't back down, was a good leader. You know, I liked that. Fantu seemed really weak in my opinion. He kind of went with the flow, and I guess Irem is kind of a peaceful planet. They don't have strong forces there. They don't build this huge military like Irino does. So that checks out. Like if that's the way that Fantu's End is, and that's the way that their people are, then yeah, then that's the way it is. The Jedi in the book, there was no fighting with it. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was some fighting with Gilla Nadai. She was in this like faux fight on this planet that Axel set up in order to, I honestly can't even remember what they were there to do. But he fought this other person that had a lightsaber, but he wasn't a Jedi. He was just there. And so it wasn't even really a fight. She realized that she was gonna take him out, you know, because he wasn't a Jedi. So they didn't even really actually fight. So there's no really fighting between the Jedi and anybody else. The Jedi characters, yeah, they're just kind of boring. Char-Ryl-Roy and Creighton's son, I mean, they were cool. They exemplified how I expected Jedi to act during this time period. So I guess from my expectations, they were historically accurate, so that's good. But there was nothing like striking or quirky about them that just made the story interesting. So yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, the story just wasn't super interesting to me. Some of the major players, Fantu Zen, like I said, was the heir to the throne of Iram and son to Queen Adriella, who's the leader of Iram. Ziri Alberan is a captain of the Ironi forces and daughter to Monarch Alberan, who's the leader of Irano. Axel Greylark is scoundrel son to Chancellor Greylark, one of 2 chancellors of the Republic. You have Master Char-Ryl-Roy, Master's son, Enya Keen, and Gilla Nadai, who are 4 Jedi that were there to help the peace negotiations between these 2 planets. And then you also had Viceroy Farrell, who was Monarch Alberan's right-hand man and was always just trying to spur up military action into Iram. If you don't like my take, I'm sorry, but like, if the book's not interesting, I'm just gonna say it. And yeah, especially coming off of the Bane series, just a bit disappointed. And it's not a reflection of the author either. Oh, I didn't even mention the author's name. The author of this book is Zoraida Cordova. I'm not familiar with this author. The book was written last year. She could be really young. I'm not familiar with any of her other work. I believe she's probably new to the Star Wars scene. Hopefully we see some more work out of her so I can have a better sample space of how she writes. But her writing style was like, as I was reading it, it was just hard for me to immerse myself in it. I couldn't, and that's really what made it not a page turner for me. If I can immerse myself in the action to where it feels like it's around me, then I can keep reading and reading and reading. I just couldn't do that with this book. It just, I don't know, it felt like dialogue kind of went back and forth to where I didn't know what was going on in the moment. Maybe that's just my reading comprehension. Maybe I'm dumb. I don't know. But I just couldn't. It was hard for me to like get a grasp of what was going on at all times. It was easier for me to do it towards the end of the book because I started to kind of get used to her style a little bit. But yeah, throughout the beginnings of the book, I don't know. It didn't stick for me. This book is part of the canon storyline, so we don't have to ask, can it be canon? Because it is canon. But with canon storyline books, what we'll ask is, can it mesh with Legends? It can. It takes place 600 years after the Bane trilogy, and if you were to mix the Legends and canon material into one chronological timeline, this would be the book that follows the events of Darth Bane. Nothing in the book even mentions Sith, so that's consistent with the Sith trying to remain, extinct. Unless I read something later that conflicts with this book, then yeah, I think it could definitely mesh with Legends. But overall, not a story that's going to stick out. It's fine. It's, if you enjoyed this book, make sure to let me know in the comments. If you wanted to purchase this book, and I'm not going to recommend that you don't purchase this book because I really think that all Star Wars material is fun to read, and it's also fun to just consume the content and figure out where everything lands in the timeline of things. It might turn out that the events of this book are extremely pivotal to events that happen later, to what Disney thinks up. I don't know. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, all the Disney stuff that's made is crap, whatever. I'm not that kind of person. I want more into the story because I like Star Wars and I like the story of Star Wars. And we'll see what Disney has to come up with that might bring this book into more significance. So I know in the past I've said that I'm not going to give any bad scores to Star Wars books. This one's not going to get the best score. I'm probably going to give it like a 5.8. Sorry, that's where it was for me. And like I said before, trying to be fair with scores, I feel like there will be more works that come up in the future that surpass this book. Because of that, 5.8. That's where I'm going with this book. But if you'd like to purchase this book, there will be a link in the description. Please be aware that if you click that link to purchase this book, I am an Amazon affiliate, and it will support this channel in some way. And it'll also support the ability to keep creating content like this so we can keep talking about Star Wars, because that's what we love to do. If you like the content that you viewed today, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, And I appreciate everybody that decided to come and watch this today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and may the Force be with you. Thank you.